Good afternoon to you. 406 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program from the New York Post, Josh Christianson is here at 4:30. We'll talk about Hunter Biden and all of the secrets the White House is keeping when it comes to his whereabouts. And then at 5 o'clock, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson is here. Don't miss that. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
The HRSA Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visiting Program launched in 2010 to improve the lives of America's most vulnerable children and families through voluntary, evidence-based home visiting for at-risk pregnant women and parents with young children.
That's a federal government program called the Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visit Program. You familiar with this? Run through HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration, another sort of mysterious program that the federal government puts on. This week, a report in the Daily Caller News Foundation finds that this federal home visiting program classifies parents who don't let their young children cross-dress as potentially abusive. Caitlin Richardson is the writer of this piece. She writes, a federally funded home visiting program advises service providers to watch for signs of abuse against gender-diverse children, citing parents who deny that their young child have the right to cross-dress as an example, a document shows. This program is intended to combat abuse and neglect while promoting positive parenting and school readiness among pregnant people, that would be mothers, and families, with young children who are at risk for poor maternal and child health outcomes, according to the website. The guidance offered to government workers who visit the homes at the request of families categorizes steering a child away from gender expression that does not correspond with his or her biological sex as abuse. One document titled Parental Acceptance of Gender Expression in Young Children tells home visitors it's important for them to, quote, recognize and address the abuse and neglect that may result, either directly or indirectly, from rejection of a child's gender expression. Gender-diverse children are frequently the targets of violence or harm, the document says, by other children, caregivers, or family members. They write that abuse need not be overt, and it can look like, quote, denying a child the right to play, dress, and act as they would like. So the feds, using your money, have created a program that encourages children to believe that they are a mistake, that their bodies were wrong for them, and that they should be enabled into saying that they're a completely different gender. What is going on here? Terry Schilling joins us now. Terry is the president of the Great American Principles Project and a Claremont Institute Lincoln Fellow as well. Terry, good to have you with us. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Vince. I love coming on talking.
You know, what is the point of all of this? Why have a program that's dedicated to the destruction of children in the federal government?
Well, it's the same intent that they had in the Cultural War that took place in China, where they turned children against their parents and parents against children. This is all meant to further divide the country. And if you want to install a tyrant in a new regime or keep that regime in place, you have to divide Americans where they are the biggest threat, and that is our families, right? Our families are what we die for. They're what we sacrifice for every day in the workplace. It is what unites our country, and it's what gives us something to fight for, right? Men and women in all the wars that we've ever gone to, they did not die to lower capital gains taxes. They went across the seas to fight tyranny so it wouldn't come here and so that their children could have a better life. But this is at the root of everything we're fighting, and I just hope people can wake up in time.
Yeah, so what is this program nominally supposed to be for? That like sometimes parents of especially low-income parents don't really know how to do it at first, and they don't have anybody else to turn to, so the feds have to come in and help teach them how to be a parent?
That's what they're telling us. But the thing is, Vince, we have millennia worth of history of parents doing their job just naturally, right? You don't need to teach a monkey how to be a parent. You don't need to teach a dog how to be a parent. You just know. And certainly you don't have to be taught how to be a parent and care for your children by the federal government. That is can you imagine if the federal government trained our dogs, how bad they would be? They would be biting everyone and crapping all over the floor. We need to keep the federal government away from our kids, but unfortunately, their hands are in everything. right? This is the government that tells us how big our toilets can be, right? So now they're telling our schools what they can teach. They're telling our parents what they can do and how they can protect our children. It's an absolute disgrace.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, and you're right. Parents figure it out. You have, how many children do you have now? 7, 8? How many kids do you have?
We got 6 with number 7 on the way.
7's on the way. Okay, so you've done this a bunch of times. You're a little more comfortable now. I remember when my first kid was born. My only kid was born. I remember thinking, the nurse asked, any more questions? That was like one of the last things she said to us. And I was like, yeah, I have a lot of questions. Is there an instruction manual? Like, what do I do here? But you do, in the end, you do figure it out, though. And you figure it out, especially if you've got, extended family and mothers and grandmothers. You learn, right? You learn from those people around you. But the idea that the federal government would have to intervene and help coach someone on how to become a parent is really troubling for the reasons you just laid out, including the fact that the federal government is normalizing abuse. Like, that's insane to me, that you would come in and say, yeah, abuse this child or else we're going to consider you to have been abusing this kid.
Well, here's the other thing, Vince, is that ironically, the people that are coming in and showing these parents how to parent, they don't have children usually. It's just like our school system. Most of these young teachers that are teaching our kids and instilling anti-American, anti-human, anti-science ideas into them, they don't have children of their own. Right? So they bring in non-experts who have read books and gotten certifications from BS universities and colleges that are just degree mills, that are just indoctrination factories, and that's who they put in charge. This is about reforming humanity so that we're all just slaves to this tyranny that is in charge right now.
It reminds me of when, like, childless busybodies join school boards, or when you get, like the fat nutritionist comes in, you're like, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work. Is there anybody else I could talk to? But yeah, you're right. It's like, why are we sending in these childless government stooges? And then one of the things they have to do, obviously, is not only tell people to abuse their children, but if they fail to report them to higher authorities.
Yes, I wanted to make that point as well. It is not just about protecting kids or, whatever they're saying it is. This is about punishing parents for not going along with abuse, right? You're actually using the law to force parents not to do what their natural instincts require them to do, which is to protect them from this multi-billion-dollar gender industry that's in our media, that's in our hospitals, that's in our schools, right? They're supposed to protect their kids from this.
This is big money, too. In 2023, this is an agency that to most of us is a mystery. It was to me, certainly. The agency awarded nearly $500 million in 2023 to these home visitors in all 50 states and 6 territories, according to their own website. And they were responsible for over 840,000 home visits all across the country. And as a part of their role, they're supposed to encourage little Timmy to wear a dress if he feels like it, rather than to give healthy, productive parenting to little Timmy.
No, that's exactly right. And here's the thing: 843,000 home visits. How many children are in those homes? Right? Do the math. Most of these parents have a ton of kids. They have 4 or 5 kids, and that's why the government's coming in and even knows about them. This is exponential. It's probably 3 to 5 million kids that they visited. It's absolutely insane. That is, there's only 72 million kids in this country, right? So they're basically getting to about 8% of them. It's a total nightmare, and we need a new president to put an end to all of this garbage.
Okay, let me move to a different issue that involves kids and parenting this week that's catching some attention. There's a show on Netflix that I was unaware of. I think my daughter's too old for it now, but it's called Coco Melon. And apparently, according to Netflix, it's the single most popular kids show, at least on that platform, maybe in the country. And there's a clip getting around the internet, and it involves this episode where a little boy is wearing a dress, dancing around, and his 2 gay dads are encouraging him to do this. Here's the audio.
Thing that we know about you, you love to get up and dance. How about you break out those moves for your 2 biggest fans? If you're not sure what to choose, think about all the things you like to do. Just be you.
Just be me?
Yep. When when you're trying to decide, think about all the things you like to do. Just be you.
Just be me.
All right, so that is bizarre and really freaky for a number of reasons. But I'd say the biggest thing is like, okay, so the two dads are standing there, this gay couple, and saying, dance for us in a dress?
Yeah, no, look, first of all, as a father of small children, I am so glad that I finally have a really good excuse to never play this annoying show in my home again. But this show is actually, this is where the Baby Shark song comes from, right? It is one of the most popular children's shows in the country, and they're using it, right? This is what Hollywood does. I wish conservatives would do this. They turn everything into a political weapon to force a worldview on people. We are the ones that are normal, though, but we don't do this in our own cartoons. We don't even have our own cartoons. We have to start competing here, and if we don't, these guys are going to dominate. Because I can shut this off because I read the news and I know about this stuff, but how many parents don't know about this? That's what's so criminal, is they're sneaking this garbage into these children's programs, and they're not being upfront with the parents.
It was, about not that long ago. I remember being a kid. There was, for instance, there was a magazine that was available for boys called Boys Life. I think it was associated with the Boy Scouts, but the concept was pretty simple. It's like you learn how to make fires and sharpen a knife and whittle and make all sorts of cool things. There was like a catalog at the back of it where you could build a hovercraft out of an old vacuum cleaner, stuff like that. And it was all dedicated to making young men into adult men and to have them experience adventures and actually, be the men they're supposed to be. And here we have a show at the most critical formative time in a child's life telling young men that it's totally cool if they dress up in dresses and women's dresses, dance around the house for their gay dads, and that is the meaning of their life.
Yeah, that's what they want. The only problem with that is that in these types of relationships and families, you can't create new human life without buying it, right? And that's a whole other ethical dilemma. This is promoting the surrogacy life, right, where you actually pay women to have your babies for them. I mean, these people talk about relegating women to only being able to, stay in the home and the kitchen. That's what they're actually doing for everyone. So, it's just a total nightmare.
Yeah, it really is, and it's a sad exploitation, narcissistic exploitation of a child that results in especially on this gender stuff, that it results in their sterility and sadness for the rest of their life. And it's like, and meanwhile, we're being sold the opposite. Oh, no. The secret to happiness is to enter them into this life of horrors where they're absorbed into the pharmaceutical industry, pay millions of dollars, and have all sorts of problems that prevent them from having a family of their own.
Yes, that's exactly right. This is a whole mix of a ton of really bad stuff. It's eugenics, it's population control, it's weird sexual ideologies that we're pushing on kids. I mean, the whole host of things that are being pushed in just one cartoon. Yes. You could write a whole book about what the agenda is here.
Let me ask you, just given that you have so much experience having your own children and kind of assessing what they're consuming, I use a website called Common Sense Media to look at a lot of this stuff, like to kind of get under the hood and figure out if there's something weird inside these books or movies or shows. Do you do that? What do you do to sort of assess the things that your kids are consuming?
I just head it off at the path, right? Like, I'm just on offense all the time. I don't trust anything. And I actually spend a lot of time watching these shows and cartoons with my kids, but we don't let them watch cable. We don't let them have their own access to iPads and iPhones and all of that without us closely monitoring it.
Yes.
I get to kind of relive my childhood by watching all these cartoons. Some of them are actually pretty good. Like the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was really, really good. So you get some golden eggs every now and then.
How about it? All right. Well, when he's not watching children's programming, he's helping save the American family. Terry Schilling, thank you very much. Good to talk to you today, sir. Have a very Merry Christmas. Yeah. It is amazing what's happening. You have to be vigilant. Kind of get ahead of your kids. Actually, you know what the easy thing to do is let your kids consume media you already know and love. the shows that you loved as a kid, you can let them watch those. Let them watch those. Looney Tunes. Those are perfect. Merry Melodies. Let's go to Mike in Washington, D.C. now. Mike, line 1 on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Vince, enjoying your show so far. As I was telling your screen caller, are you familiar with the original G.I. Joe series from the 80s and the 90s?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, now one of my all-time favorite villains was the Madman Cobra Commander, and he was the leader of the terrorist organization called Cobra. And he told his followers, he said, "Look, if you really want to rule the world, you got to rule the entertainment industry." And so what they did in that episode, they put a satellite up in space to jam all of the other satellites so the broadcast would not happen. And then they start putting their ideology on how to convince people to join the terrorist organization known as Cobra. And then they had people from the business people was pissed off, and they wanted to do business. They had to go to this terrorist organization. They said, "Okay, if you want to do business with us, you got to pay us $1 million per episode to promote your products." And they said, "You're out of your mind." They said, "We the only people in town," and they all agreed with it. So it was just one of those things. So when I heard that little animation that you just played, trying to indoctrinate kids to be ashamed of who they are, it just reminded me of that episode of G.I. Joe, and it tells you clearly on how they brainwashing people right now through the entertainment industry. And then when you look at your elected officials, that knows what's really going on, but they have been paid off by the medical industry, the transgender lobbying groups. All these politicians are just bought and paid off. So
totally right.
You got to really look on who you're going to vote for and look at their policies. And if their policies, I hear people complain about the politicians all the time. As a matter of fact, I wish that y'all would let your listening audience talk to the politicians when they come on your show, because if they're afraid to talk to your listening audience, they shouldn't be in office. So, that's all I want to say, man. Keep up the good work. Peace.
Thanks very much, Mike. And Mike, you know what you make me think.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate it. See? Mike made us smarter, and now we know. And knowing, as they say, half the battle. G.I. Joe. That is a good throwback, though. It used to be, and it was always like this, too. You remember the old cartoons and sitcoms? They would actually have this moment where, the end of the show would be like, okay, and the moral of this program is that you should take care of your friends, or you shouldn't lie. There'd be some sort of redemptive quality. I don't know. Maybe that was just designed to make parents tolerant of the fact that you were watching like a big, like war show. The whole thing is just like shooting bad guys and stuff. And at the end, it was like, and remember, kids, always listen to your parents. And you're like, well, that's all right, they can watch the show again next weekend. As long as they've got that wholesome message at the end. It's like they sit down. Didn't they do that like on Full House and Family Matters? Like at the end of the show, they always sit down. There's some light music playing. And that's why we love each other. Oh, that's a sweet end of the show. It's not like that anymore. Now it's 6-year-old Timmy dances around in his dress for his gay dads. You're like, what's that on the screen? What are you watching? Don't worry. Netflix is raising your children. Hey, coming up on the program, Josh Christianson will be here from the New York Post. He'll talk to us about one of the model families in our country, the Bidens, and the way they're hiding Hunter Biden's activities. Hey there. Good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program today, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson joins us, gives us the big picture of what's happening in the world. Don't miss it. I always love hearing from VDH. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Here's some sound from the White House earlier this week.
We were all just watching the first family's return from Delaware on Marine One, and my colleague Peter Ducey noticed someone hop off the chopper who was not on the passenger list the White House gave us. Hunter Biden. So Hunter is apparently here at the White House after defying a congressional subpoena while being indicted and facing a maximum of 17 years behind bars on the financial crimes, plus another 25 on the gun charges that he is facing, John.
Yeah, it's a mystery. Hunter Biden, you've got to spot him, but they're not going to tell you about it. In fact, a reporter asked the White House this week, will there be any public disclosure of Hunter's travels?
And then I noticed today when the president arrived on Marine One that Hunter Biden and his son Beau were also on the helicopter with them. The White House provides to the public a list of staffers who travel with the president. Why don't they provide a list of the family members that travel with the president on these government-funded?
I have to double check to see if that is indeed correct, because I did ask about that. So let me just double check. Look, I'll say this more broadly. Obviously, you've seen the president with his family these past couple of days, and I think you know why. They were observing a very somber anniversary for them. And so
you're supposed to be talking to the American people. Please don't talk in like opaque ways.
I'm not going to add anything more to that, but this was obviously a somber moment in the family, and so they were certainly together to acknowledge and take part in that anniversary. So we just want to be really sensitive to that.
That's a whole lot of not answering the question. Finally, here's Jackie Heinrich asking, will Hunter's presence be disclosed by the White House going forward?
Will the White House announce Hunter Biden's presence on Marine One moving forward?
That's something that we've never done. This is the family. The family gets to travel with the president, and that's been the case with every other president. And so it's not something that we have done or we would be doing moving forward.
We've never done that. We won't do that. What's the truth here? Let's ask an actual reporter. Josh Christianson is a politics reporter from the excellent New York Post, and he joins us now. Hello, Josh. Good to have you with us.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
So Karine Jean-Pierre says, we've never done this. The family names have never appeared on any public disclosure. Is that true?
No, that's not actually true. We found in our report that Frank Biden, who's one of the brothers of the president, was one of the few family members included on official White House visitors logs when we did a review of them. And this has been the case, for this whole year. We've known kind of that he was included in one of the earlier state dinners in April. But despite that, you see 2 months later in June that both Hunter Biden and also James Biden, the president's other brother, were not included on White House visitors logs, which is why we wrote it up and asked the White House for comment about it. Right. And so, when it comes to Hunter Biden, I feel like there's still a prevailing mystery of where exactly he lives. I mean, has the White House ever said that Hunter lives at the White House for any meaningful period of time? No, the White House hasn't said that, although if you read the Washington Post, they had a report a number of months ago that was pretty well sourced and indicated that he had been living there for at least 2 weeks in the spring before his plea deal was announced. And it's uncertain how many other weeks of the year he's been living there. But we know this isn't the only time he's returned on Marine One, because he visited Camp David with his dad 2 weekends in a row in the spring. And that was around the same time as the plea deal was announced. So it's anyone's guess as to how many days total he's been at the executive mansion. It seems pretty clear, despite the White House resisting telling us much about this, that Joe and Hunter Biden have definitely been talking to one another about everything that's going on right now in Hunter's life, including Hunter's decision to thumb his nose at Congress and refuse to testify despite that subpoena that he received. Is that your view? Yeah, well, the White House was open about that. They said the president was familiar, I think was the quote, that he was going to flout that subpoena. So I think there's been a number of, we're heading into the holiday recess now, but I wouldn't be surprised if when Congress comes back, there's some further congressional action in response to that. Right. But previously, Joe Biden had indicated when it came to the January 6th committee that he thought that a subpoena was something that people should follow, and if they don't, that breaking the law and should be prosecuted. Has the White House deconflicted why the president said that in the first place and why he now seems to be comfortable with his son breaking the law? I'm not sure, actually. I didn't see Karine's full quote on that. I did know that they said familiar, but I don't think she commented specifically on the different handling of a subpoena. I know, for instance, there were different comments made when Steve Bannon was subpoenaed or that sort of thing, but I didn't follow closely her response to that. My sense is that the White House really wants this story to go away, the Hunter Biden
saga. But my guess is you anticipate it's not going anywhere.
Well, it's certainly not going anywhere. I mean, you just had the House authorize the impeachment inquiry formally on the floor earlier this month. You have Hunter Biden. Of course, he dodged his deposition, but whether it's a deposition or a public hearing, something's going to happen in the new year. You have James Biden, who's also been subpoenaed. This is going to be the forefront of, the second term of the 118th Congress, particularly for House Republicans.
Okay. Yeah. And are you detecting whether the volume of questions is increasing about Hunter Biden in the press briefing, or is it the same reporters who are asking these questions all the time? The New York Post, Fox News, and a few others.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see, it was Jackie Heinrich with that question. I think Peter Doocy also, is typically asking those sorts of questions. Around the time in the spring when the president first acknowledged Hunter's love child as one of his grandchildren, there were some questions about that from other reporters that you don't normally see bringing it up. But for the most part, the questions are phrased as, what House Republicans are doing, what sorts of actions they're taking, and less so on the president's son and his foreign business dealings.
Right.
And particularly his father's involvement in those.
And the framing of a lot of these questions rests on the idea that there is no evidence that Joe Biden was the beneficiary of any of these arrangements, right?
Yeah, I take umbrage with that because the Post has really cut its teeth on collecting all the evidence on this sort of thing. So the idea that there's no evidence, I don't know what the threshold for evidence is anymore when I read those phrases.
Right, because all the business partners keep indicating that Joe Biden had a pretty substantial hand in enriching, at the very least, his son. And he was involved in all of these phone calls and meetings and approvals and signing off, and he was considered the big guy by multiple business partners. So with all of that, you and I would consider that to be evidence in this story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't even have to we made a lot of hay off the laptop. A lot of people have. But, I mean, you look at any of the kind of witnesses that have been deposed by congressional committees this year, they've made all sorts of claims about both the president's awareness and, potential involvement. Sometimes their language was more cautious than others. But the idea that there's no evidence at all is, pretty laughable at this point.
Here's a last question for you, and I'm grateful for your time today, Josh. A couple weeks ago, Biden was asked by your colleague Stephen Nelson to account for all of his meetings with Biden family business partners. And Biden responded by saying that those were lies, that it wasn't true, that it didn't happen. And in fact, Stephen Nelson asked for clarification, and he once again insisted that they were all lies. Are you surprised that there weren't follow-ups about this? Because this was from your colleagues in the press, not just at the New York Post. There's no follow-ups on this question. The president of the United States just lied explicitly to the American people, and it seems like that story just blipped out and nobody really followed up.
Yeah, and Steve was pointing out that this is based on public polling, that the American people actually want to know about this. I think the figure cited was around 70%, have concerns that he was involved. So as to why the White House press corps doesn't ask more, especially when that statement wasn't even in keeping with earlier statements he's made on the business arrangements. He's called it lies at some point. He's been more kind of straight-nosed and kind of said that, I had no involvement, or the most recent line, I had no financial involvement, what his son said. So it kind of depends on the day how the president's going to respond. But you could tell he was pretty agitated with the question there.
Yeah, well, God bless Stephen Nelson for asking it. He tends to figure out a way to get them in, even if the White House doesn't want him to, which is why we love him. All right, hey, Josh Christianson over at the New York Post. Please have a Merry Christmas. Thank you very much for your time, sir, today.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas to you as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Yeah, the New York Post, great American newspaper. But there are only a handful of people that are willing to even dare ask these questions. Philip Wegman, Stephen Nelson, and the guys over at Fox. It's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that that's the case, but it is the way of things. And have you noticed that principally, if you watch these White House press briefings, which I don't encourage, they're mind-numbing experiences by and large, but the primary questions are about other countries' problems. It's almost entirely about Ukraine and Israel. And there's a place for these questions. I'm not questioning that. But the questions should be, if you were like an actual American White House press correspondent, look, if you're a foreign correspondent, it makes total sense. If you're Simon Atiba, I wouldn't be surprised if you're asking questions about Africa. That's your beat. But for the rest of you people, particularly the American citizens in the press corps, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Our border doesn't exist. How about a question or two about that? And so it's left to Stephen Nelson to be like, hey, why'd you meet so often with these business partners? Do you regret that at all? The American people think you're a crook. It's a lie. They're all lies. So you're saying you didn't meet with the business partners? They're all lies, he says. Okay. All right. And that's it. That's where it goes to die. But Joe Biden, the single most obviously dishonest person in the American federal government, that's a pretty high bar, or low, depending on your perspective, gets the final word. Biden gets the final word on the subject. Meanwhile, Congress is still pushing along its impeachment inquiry. We'll see where that goes. We'll see if it's of use to the American people. Hopefully it nets some information useful during the election so voters are more aware of what Biden's up to. Because remember, in the last election, they concealed it. They conspired with the big tech companies and the American news media to prevent you from finding out information about the Biden family and how much money they were making from places like Ukraine. They impeached Donald Trump for even asking the question. How dare you? How dare you explore something real? You shall be impeached. You shall be impeached for this. Now, one other thing you should know about that Congress is up to, this is one of those times where I wish I had vocalized this on the air. I don't think I said this out loud. I think I just said it to Corey, so maybe the studio's bugged. But we definitely have microphones, no question. I don't know. I just don't know if Speaker Mike Johnson is listening in. I said to Corey, I swear to you, I said to Corey earlier this week, I said, you know what the Republicans should do? Like, if they, let's see some action here. Why don't they get every single Republican member of Congress and they go to the freaking border and they have a press conference to talk about our border being wide open? I mean, if you can't do much, and you can't, being only controlling one half of one branch of government, get everyone to the border and emphasize what a complete unmitigated disaster this is. Headline for you, out in the last hour from the Washington Examiner. Speaker Johnson planning GOP-only trip to southern border in January. Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, is planning a members-only trip to the southern border at the beginning of the new year, and the conference is set to push hard on the Senate and administration to pass border security reforms. In an invite obtained by the Washington Examiner, Johnson asked all Republican members on Wednesday, all of them, to join him on a congressional member delegation to Eagle Pass, Texas, which is along the southern border, of course, on January 2nd and 3rd. A spokesman for Johnson declined to comment on the trip. This comes as House Republicans are putting pressure on President Joe Biden and the Senate to pass transformative border security measures and to secure the southern border, which has seen record numbers of illegals coming across into the country this year. On Thursday, that's today, Johnson wrote to Biden urging him to take executive action to address the surge, pressing him to reinstate a slew of Trump-era policies as border negotiations in the Senate drag on. Quote, we passed H.R. 2 more than 6 months ago, Johnson said, but Senate Democrats have refused to act on it. While a bipartisan group of senators has begun extensive negotiations over the past few weeks to try to find a compromise, they have not yet been able to finalize an agreement. Yeah, and of course the Democrats want more illegals in the country. That's the goal of their immigration negotiation. Statutory reforms designed to restore operational control at our southern border must be enacted, but the crisis at our southern border has deteriorated to such an extent that significant action can wait no longer. It must start now, and it must start with you, Johnson wrote to Biden. Johnson has also said that the House will not pass Biden's supplemental request for Israel and Ukraine aid without first approving major policy changes on the border. And while a bipartisan group of senators has been working on a set of border reforms, a deal is yet to come to fruition and may not before the new year. That's the Washington Examiner report. But again, this is one of those things. It's like, shoot, I should have said it in public only to get the credit for it. But other than that, that's totally fine. I don't care one way or the other because at least they're doing it. And I hope that the symbolism of this is meaningful. I hope it produces something positive. If you can get every single Republican member to go, it might move the ball a little. But Speaker Mike Johnson, according to the Examiner today, planning an all-Republican trip to America's southern border. Let it not be a waste of taxpayer resources. Please, let it be for something good. Something good has to happen. We can only go up from here. Well, let's check in on the phones. We've got Frank calling in from Ashburn now. Frank, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hello, Vince. Thanks
Hey, sir.
for all your hard work, and thanks for hearing me.
Yes, sir.
Comment. It kind of struck. I never realized this until recently, but I always thought that all the immigration problem and all the open borders was to gain votes for the Democrats, and I think that might be sort of a side, a tertiary consideration.
Right.
But I think it's all part of a large global movement. You got all these Westernized countries in Europe doing the same exact thing. I met with somebody about a week ago. It was a woman that moved here from Germany with her husband. She met her husband there. He was a military guy, and they came back, and she left Germany. She said, we have so much illegal immigration going on. They're not vetting people. They don't make them speak the language, and they're giving them more social benefits than the German people get. They're livid. And I think this is happening all over. It's just, I don't know what we're going to do to solve it, but it seems like it's just that Marxist progression of everything. It's an attack on everything, the country, borders, religion, the family. It's almost like too much to bear.
I know. And I think that's part of the point. They want to overwhelm you, so you're not sure which front to fight on. But you are right about this. It's one thing to look at just the United States in isolation and say, man, look at all of this illegal immigration the left is foisting upon us, which they are. They're responsible for it. And I love how sometimes the White House is like, well, it's a global problem. It's all over the place. No, you're in particular destroying our border. I'm not worried about protecting the rest of the globe. I'm worried about protecting this country right now. But you're totally right. They've made these estimates years ago that, if we replace voters here with foreign nationals, then maybe it'll result in long-term power for us. And it turns out not necessarily. People, vote for all different reasons. They care about their families no matter where they come from. They may not necessarily vote for Democrats, but boy, the cause of globalism absolutely being advanced by all of this. And it is happening all across the planet with a big assist from the lunatics who are in charge here right now. No question about that. You're totally right about that, Frank. Hey, coming up, Victor Davis Hanson is exactly the kind of big picture thinker who can assess what's going on. He'll join us next.